I recently sat down with Ventura City Manager Bill Ayub, and during this interview we covered a wide range of topics from Ventura WaterPure to urban infill, homelessness, fire safety, road conditions, and so much more. In fact, we covered so much ground that I've decided to split this interview into two parts. So what you're about to watch is part one, with part two coming out next week. I think you guys will find this super interesting, and I hope that you enjoy. So today we're sitting down with Bill Ayub, City Manager of the City of Ventura. And Bill, I'd love to just kind of start with you introducing yourself. Who are you? How did you get to this position? What are some of your big motivations for choosing a career in civil service?
Yeah, well, thanks. I have a little unusual path to city managership. I started out very early in my career in law enforcement. Right out of high school, I thought that was something I wanted to do. I tried it on for size and loved it. And 37 years later, I retired as the sheriff of Ventura County. I retired for a little bit, didn't really fit me well. I just wasn't ready for a life of leisure. And the opportunity here at the City of Ventura came up, and I've been a resident for most of my life, about 54 years. And I recognize that my experience in the public sector, and you might say law enforcement, what does that have to do with being a manager of a city? There's a lot of overlap and a lot of similarities in actuality.
I'd love to know about some of those similarities and some of that overlap. What are you taking, or what are you able to take from your experience as being the sheriff and applying that to city management?
So the higher I got up in law enforcement into management, it became more and more about policy setting, about financial management, about managing people, leading people, and being responsive to the community, elected officials, the constituents in the community that are residents that use city, county facilities. All those things are very similar to what my responsibilities are here. Getting the right team in place, selecting employees for critical positions. I always like to say that if I can have all the greatest ideas and all the technical competencies in the world, but if I don't have a good team to execute them, it's all going to fall apart. And so it really boils down to getting the right people in place and getting them going in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that's what I did in law enforcement in my later years. And that's what I do here. And there's some more technicalities here with the job, a lot of land use items and legal matters that come up that, I like to say the city's like a ship, and I'm trying to keep it off the shore, off the shoals. And so there's a little trimming of the trajectory of the ship that's involved, and that's what we do here in this office.
Fantastic.
And so the opportunity came up. I convinced the city council that I was the right person for the job. They took a chance on me, and I think things are going pretty well so far.
Fabulous, fabulous. So you mentioned that you're from the City of Ventura. I want to just kind of, before we jump into some of these harder hitting questions here, I want to kind of touch on you growing up here, your love for the City of Ventura, and also I'd love to know, this is a question that I frequently like to ask folks when I interview them, if you were to plan out your perfect day for a guest that's visiting from out of the area, what does that perfect day look like?
Okay. I was born and raised in Ventura. My parents are from here. My grandparents were here as well. In fact, I live in my grandparents' home that they built in 1947.
That's incredible.
And I love the town. I've been fortunate enough to travel many places. I always look at real estate. I know what costs are, taxes, political environments, that sort of thing. I think Ventura is this kind of perfect sort of the Goldilocks area where it's not too hot, not too cold, not too expensive, not too it's the right balance of everything, from good schools to work opportunities to access to culture to can't beat our weather. You simply can't. It's a beautiful town. You have the hillsides, you have the ocean, you have a sort of laid back vibe that's comfortable. But it's not, it's not a.
It's approachable.
It's not a backwoods town, There's, it's contemporary yet, but it's slow to move into the future.
Yeah.
And a lot of the people I care deeply about are here. My family's here. friends, a lot of long-term friends stay here. It's a hard place to leave.
Absolutely.
And the more places I go, the better Ventura is. And so I have, actually my old college roommate, we reconnected, I don't know, 20 years, 25 years after we graduated. And I came to find out that he was a regular visitor here, lives in the Inland Empire. And he comes to Ventura to get away from it all. For him, it's the best place for him to come.
Yeah.
And I get to live here, and we get to live here, right? Yeah. And so for me, you know, I love the outdoors. One of the reasons I love Ventura so much. Perfect day for me would be a nice leisurely wake up with some kind of exercise outdoors, a nice meal at one of our, you know, kind of our funky eateries in town. We talked about rumfish before the camera started rolling. One of my favorites in town. But I love Ventura's variety of food. I moved away for a few years to Las Vegas, and one of the things I missed most about Ventura was the fresh fruits and vegetables that, unless you have moved away or live somewhere else, you don't appreciate here the same. I do.
Yeah.
Because even in Las Vegas, which isn't far away, you had a lot of frozen vegetables and fruits, and it's different.
Absolutely.
And so those are all, you know, the special things for me. A night out downtown would be you know, a perfect capstone to that day.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you for sharing that with us. So moving over to the Ventura WaterPure Project, I have a few questions about that. So when I'm talking to residents, consumers, folks that are interested in purchasing, you know, properties here in Ventura, the project has gotten a lot of headlines and a lot of press lately. I'm just curious, what is your take on the project? Where do we stand with it? Any updates that you can provide to us?
Yeah, you know, to the uninformed, it's a very controversial project. We just came off 2 rainy years. Our reservoir, Lake Casitas, is overtopping, which is amazing.
Yeah.
Aquifers are recharging. It's a slow process. Ventura is sandwiched between 2 rivers. We do not have a water supply outside of our local water supply, meaning we have groundwater, and we have water from the Ventura River that comes, you know, from the Lake Casitas reservoir. Our water supply is tenuous in that sense. We do not have the state water interconnect. Most cities, certainly larger cities like Ventura, have that state water interconnect. We do not currently. That's part of our capital improvement plan to establish that. The idea being that the more sources of water supply our community has, the better position we are to move into the future. And that's what Ventura WaterPure is partly about. It's about reusing water. That technology has been around for decades to purify wastewater and turn it into drinkable water. That's not new technology. On large scales, it's been implemented in other places. That's part of the Ventura WaterPure project. The other part is replacing aging wastewater infrastructure at the Ventura Harbor plant. We have a plant at Spinnaker and Harbor. You may have smelled it when you've driven by. But there was a time where it was state of the art. It's no longer that. The buildings have exceeded their projected useful life. We're seeing decay there that needs to be repaired. The repairs are costly. The danger there is that of a failure in which the city's only wastewater treatment facility is out of commission, and suddenly we can't treat our wastewater, and we're all in trouble if we get to that point. Yeah, and so you have this balance between investing tens of millions of dollars in fixing the existing equipment that would be a temporary fix for a fairly short period of time, or investing in replacement, new technology, you know, safer and better technology, if you will, which requires new infrastructure and structural development and so forth. So there's really 4 pieces to Ventura WaterPure. One is the ocean outfall, the large pipe that we miraculously snaked through the earth and out a mile into the ocean.
Underneath Marina Park.
Yes, it's absolutely fascinating how it was done. Very costly, very technically difficult to do, specialized people and equipment to do it. That's basically a drain pipe for the product that's produced from the wastewater treatment process. And so that's one part of it, the drain pipe. We had to do that for legal requirements. We currently drain into the Santa Clara River estuary, and that's the river mouth there, where the river meets the Pacific Ocean. That is a sensitive environment for habitat and species. When we established that drainage point initially, it wasn't a consideration, wasn't a problem. Over time, regulations have changed. Ventura became a polluter, and Ventura is now subject to a consent decree, which is a legal requirement that says you have to drain somewhere else. And then you have to take this water and you have to, the wastewater byproduct, and you have to give it a beneficial use for the public. And so this has been ongoing for many years, by the way. And so that beneficial reuse has been studied. There's different ways in which that could be done. All of it requires that exhaust pipe, which is phase one, I say. Phase two is a replacement of the wastewater treatment.
Okay.
Phase three would be and four would be the beneficial reuse part. So the wastewater treatment treats the water to a certain level. Some of that water is used for irrigating parks. It's not potable, so you don't drink it. You don't put it on vegetation that you're going to consume. So it's not good for irrigation of farmlands. But it is good for some things, some landscaping and that sort of thing. We produce more than is used now. It's available to the public. If you have a truck with a tank, you can go and pick some up and take it and water your lawns. It's a great way to save money because it's very inexpensive. But we have that byproduct now. That byproduct will, assuming VenturaWaterPure moves forward as envisioned, it would then go to the phase three is an advanced purification facility that would take that non-potable water and turn it into a highly purified water. Drinkable, it's so purified that it's actually not drinkable. You wouldn't want to put a highly purified water into your system or directly onto vegetation. It would be bad for it.
Okay.
Leaches chemicals and nutrients out of what it goes into.
Got it.
It would then go to injection wells where it would be placed into underground aquifers, and we have part of our water supply locally is underground aquifer supply that's naturally created from the two rivers that feed Ventura, and that's the plan. The costs were high to begin with. We've seen inflation related to materials and labor. Part of it's from well-intentioned money that the federal government has injected into civilian infrastructure. It's created a glut of work, and therefore everyone's reaching for those materials, that specialized equipment, those special laborers that do the work. And so we've just seen really exponential increases in costs associated with it. And I honestly don't see an end to that elevated cost, because you have beneficial reuse for water programs like this going on all around us. Callegas is working on one. Metropolitan Los Angeles is working on one. So all of these water purveyors are going to be looking for the same kind of materials, the same skilled labor, the same high technology equipment. And so, time is really of the essence. Well, we're not leaders, but we're out front of some of the big players in beneficial reuse. Ventura's well positioned right now to receive federal funding and of some of which we have received, and we're certainly looking for more.
So let's talk about costs then, and how does that affect the Ventura homeowner and the Ventura ratepayer, I guess is probably a more accurate way to say that. But do you foresee costs continuing to rise for ratepayers here in the city of Ventura? And is that a short-term problem? Is that a long-term problem? What should homeowners expect?
Yeah, yes and yes. I do see rates rising. They're unquestionably going to rise. We have major capital infrastructure projects. Water delivery and wastewater are what's called enterprise funds. The city's general fund does not support those. They are self-perpetuating. So in other words, the costs for water delivery, water removal through the wastewater process is borne by fees and water rates that are paid by the consumer, the businesses, and the residents that have water connections, the ratepayers. So costs are definitely going to go up. How much they go up is in flux. Because of rising costs for the project, of course that increased the cost to the ratepayer. However, if federal funding comes through and we're gifted dollars by the federal government, that offsets those costs and that reduces the cost to the ratepayer. We've paid them in other ways through federal taxes or tariffs or whatever means those dollars come from. But our city council that has to make these difficult decisions recognizes that we need a wastewater system that's reliable, that's modern, that's resilient. We also need the same thing in our water supply, and so we really have to do this project. But the cost and the burden to the ratepayer is at the front of their mind. They know there's people that live paycheck to paycheck that are going to be burdened by increased costs, and so that weighs heavily on them. And it's something that we, as staff, take very seriously. We're ratepayers, and we just as soon not pay more for water delivery or wastewater. But you also recognize that hey, a 20-year drought might be on the horizon. Yes, we just had a couple wet years, but we just don't know what the future holds, and we want to be in a position to have a resilient and drought-tolerant water supply.
That's fair. And one final question on that, on the Ventura WaterPure, before we move on. Is the project on track so far and ready for implementation? I know that the goal is 2030. Are we still on track for that?
Yeah, there's various timelines that we're required to adhere to per the consent decree. And the consent decree is, in essence, a federal court order that we do a certain thing, and we have to change where we discharge the effluent from the wastewater treatment process and then have this beneficial reuse. And so there are progress points along the way. We're dangerously close to not being able to meet those timelines.
Okay.
And so delay not only costs more money for the project's inflated fees and material costs, but we also have the worry about being out of compliance with the consent decree and potentially facing fines and penalties for that.
Understood. Thank you. I'd like to touch on urban infill. So oftentimes I'm getting comments from consumers and homeowners in the community talking about apartment and condo projects that are being approved and built here in the city of Ventura. Is that driven by the state of California's quota that they've handed down to cities as far as new housing units and new housing starts? Is that a component of that, or is that the city of Ventura that's driving this new construction?
Well, a little of both, I'd say. There are some state mandates that restrict local control on development, and so we've been in Ventura a long time, me a little longer, but there were since I was a kid, vacant spots of land around Ventura just hadn't been developed for one reason or another. Maybe years ago there were service stations that had ground pollution that needed to be excavated and so forth. It was too costly to do and too onerous for a developer. But some of those restrictions have been pulled away, and infill development encouraged through a streamlining of regulations. And so and you have a shortage of housing, and so housing costs are high locally. For a developer who's developers are in the business of making money, like our various professions. We have to earn a living.
Yeah.
That's how they earn their living. They look for places where they can make a profit, of course. And so for a profitable location, there's streamlined regulations. You make those previously undesirable spots to develop more appealing. And so we've seen a lot of that infill. Now we are seeing redevelopment of older properties, perhaps in favor of more density, higher building height, more units. So you're seeing that around Ventura. The city is in the process of undergoing its general plan update. The general plan is kind of a roadmap, a 20-year roadmap for the future. And a huge component of that is land use and what that looks like. And so there were many conversations by the city council, by the community members, by the general plan advisory committee, which is a collaboration of stakeholders that have been meeting for close to 4 years now, about that land use, what it looks like, how do you maintain Ventura's cool, kind of funky character while creating opportunities for young people. My kids, for example, are looking for places to live, and there's not a lot of inventory.
Yeah.
There's just not. And you're in a real estate business. You know what's out there and what's not, and so there's limited place for. And let's talk. I mean, and let's talk about how the economic piece of it plays too. If you're an employer and you're looking for a place to build your headquarters, would you come to a place where your employees can't afford to live?
No.
Where there's no housing for them, where it's you can't afford to pay them what it would take for them to be able to live there? Probably not.
Yeah.
You'd go to Texas or somewhere else where there's space and housing opportunities and a lower cost of living. And so those are part of the considerations when creating housing density, more infill, is how do we make sure Ventura survives? Because you see, if you've seen some of the economic reports, we have an aging population, we have declining school enrollment, both at the high school and college levels. You're in essence seeing Ventura turn into a retirement community.
Yeah.
And that's scary if you're thinking about the future and the economic viability of the city going 10, 20, 30, 50 years from now. And so we're always looking for ways to make sure that, kind of like the water supply, that we have revenue streams, that we're an attractive place for people to raise their families. It's a safe community. And adding the housing opportunities is part of that. It's just creating more opportunity for employers to put down some roots here, for young people to come here. They can work remote, I suppose, but we need the revenue that comes from business being in the community, from people living here, spending their dollars at restaurants and their retailers, and so it all really interplays.
Absolutely. You touched on maintaining the Ventura vibe, or the funky Ventura vibe.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard specific criticisms of a project in Midtown, I won't say which, and the architectural style of the exterior of that building not really fitting the Ventura vibe. Mm-hmm. What is the city able to do, or what are you doing to make sure that we are maintaining our character and our charm, and make sure that these buildings fit within the existing communities?
Yeah, great question, thank you. And I know, I think you don't need to say what you're talking about, I know. Many of these buildings that are springing to life now were entitled years ago.
Okay.
Years and years ago. And it's not an excuse, it's just an explanation that, there's vacant lots right now that I know there's a project planned for, and it's going to be built, and I have no control over it because it's already been approved.
Okay.
We have what we call a design review committee, and these are community members who have expertise in building design, and they look over every plan that comes in now, and have some really kind of onerous requirements on developers, builders. While we in some fashion promote economic building, so you have lower cost facilities for people to either live in or do business in. We want it to look good. We want it to be a good addition to the community, and so we have that. We are looking at having design standards, and what those are things that allow people to build in a more simplified way by creating specific designs that someone could go and select from, approved configurations and so forth. You see a lot of it in Santa Barbara. If you go to Santa Barbara, everything is sort of the Mediterranean, Spanish style, Spanish revival look, and it looks great. Yeah. Everything kind of looks the same, and that's a nice thing. Ventura's not that. It's not Camarillo, where everything has a brick tile roof, and but there are characteristics that are Ventura, and if you started kind of jotting them down or pointing to a building or another. You go, that's Ventura, that.
Yeah.
And it is a funky collection of, you got a Victorian home here, you got
Next
a place
to a
that looks like,
Craftsman.
yeah, or a place that looks like it came out of Miami, you know,
Yeah.
and just a really sort of hodgepodge of things. But you also have respect for architecture. You have our mission downtown, this building, City Hall, you know, some of the Ventura Theater, some of the other places that you know, have historical significance, and there's an effort to preserve that in our community. And we're not a community of skyscrapers and so forth, and that's where I think there's design features that can come into play to where you can get that extra density, the housing, but you can also build it in such a way that it's not offensive, it's not imposing, it's actually something you kind of go, wow, you know, I really like that.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're striving to do.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for watching part 1 of my interview with Bill Ayub. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel so that you will be notified when part 2 comes out next week.